Welcome to Quilting on the Side, the podcast where we uncover the secrets to turning your passion for quilting into a profitable side hustle.
I'm Tori from the Quilt Patch by Tori.
And I'm Andi from True Blue Quilts. And together, we're your co-hosts on this exciting journey of creativity, entrepreneurship, and all things quilting.
We're here to help you navigate the world of quilt pattern design, course creation, digital marketing, and running an online quilt business. We've been through the ups and downs ourselves, so we know what it takes to make money from your favorite hobby.
That's right, Tori. We're going to share our experiences on how we've grown our businesses while balancing family with other paying work responsibilities. It's not always easy, but it's definitely possible. Welcome to another episode of Quilting on the Side, and Tori and I are so excited to catch up with someone we have known for almost our entire quilt business life. We were all three together in a class back in the day, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to Kaye Collins of Oh Kaye Quilting. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
We always start off, we want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us how you got started quilting and what made you turn it into a business.
Well, my very first quilt I actually made in 1989, which might be before Tori was even born. I was a first-year teacher in Calais, Maine, which is way over on the border with New Brunswick. And we had 3 TV channels, 2 of which were in French, and my French was pretty meh. So I was walking by, I was a teacher, so I was walking by the school library and I saw a book about quilting. And I got that book and I was off and running. I went to Rich's, which was a department store. They kind of had everything. And I bought some fabric in the classic 80s colors of Dutch blue, dusty rose, cream, and kind of a sage green. And I made a rail fence. And I still have that quilt. I gave it to my mom for Christmas in 1989. I had no idea how to quilt it. So I tied it. But of course, I only tied it on the corners of the blocks. So they're like 10 inches apart. But I still have the quilt. I could do more things to it. But you know what? It's been around for a long time now. And I think that doing anything else to it would kind of ruin the story. So I have it and it's in a cedar chest here in my home.
Oh, that's neat. So then when did you decide to make quilting your business?
So, well, that just kind of happened. a lot of us end up in accidental businesses, I think, in the quilting world. So I started finding quilting again, Pinterest, right? The advent of Pinterest. I was actually a scrapbooker and I was very into digital scrapbooking, and that's how I found Pinterest. And then I started seeing all these beautiful quilts. I'm like, I could quilt, and I didn't really understand that there were quilt patterns. So I would just see something and make it because my geometry skills, I guess, are pretty good. We won't discuss algebra. Okay. And so I started making quilts, and things kind of got out of hand in 2014 when my son joined the Marines. And that is a very difficult transition because you're not going to hear from them for months. And so I just started quilting, and I think I made 56 quilts that year. I was just sewing, and I was keeping 3 long armors busy. And all of a sudden, it took a couple of years, but the light bulb went on. It was like, bing, maybe I could be doing this myself. But I was already doing all the baby quilts and all the like up to about 60 by 60, I would free motion on my domestic machine, which was wonderful. And so I didn't really plan to get into a business, but I had to have a brand because when we went to the Marine Corps graduation, for about an hour, we got harangued about shutting down our Facebook pages and only allowing people we actually knew. And so it was actually in 2014 that I branded myself as Oh Kaye Quilting, just so I would have a place to go make quilty friends. And but I didn't really turn it into a business until 2020 when I met you guys in the patchwork course. And that's when I set up my website, and I thought, I'm not doing anything else. We're all locked up. So let's see what I can do.
And what was your first step in quilting? Were you selling finished quilts? Were you designing patterns? What was your business model at the start?
So I thought that I was going to be a quilt pattern designer. And so we all took the patchwork course with Shannon Brinkley. And one of the very first lessons that Shannon teaches is kind of all the different income streams and different ways you can teach. And I thought, you know what? We talked about our superpowers. And I thought, I really enjoy teaching. My real job, it was that I was a high school band director, and I love teaching. So I knew I wanted to do something like that. There was one thing that she talked about that I knew I did not want to do. And that was, I did not want to teach anyone else's IP. I didn't want anything to do with anyone else's intellectual property.
When you
Guess
mentioned
what
that,
I do? I teach for Handy Quilter. So that was just kind of a funny thing. It's a good lesson of never say never. I have just really enjoyed my time with them. But so I thought that I was going to be a quilt pattern designer, and I was really working on that. Meanwhile, I'm honing my long arm skills, and this was a case of who you know and when you meet them. And I had been posting on Instagram all my different quilt things, and happened to meet someone who later sent me an email and said, "You should apply to be a Handy Quilter National Educator." And I said, "Oh, that's crazy." But I filled out the application, and a few months later, my life, literally, I got a call on a Friday afternoon. I think it was a Friday. It might have been Thursday. I had to be at training on Monday. So over a weekend, my life really changed, and it has been a huge change, not just for me, but for my family, because I'm gone a lot now.
So currently, what does your business look like? Are you a pattern designer? Are you a long armer? What do you do?
So I kind of have a lot of different things that I do. So first of all, as a national educator for Handy Quilter, I go out and I teach mostly at quilt shops. Sometimes I represent the company at quilt shows. And so I do that usually 1 to 2 weekends a month. I still do have quilt patterns, and I kind of maybe 2 or 3 quilt patterns a year. That make it to my website. I tend to only make my own designs. Every once in a while, I'll make someone else's quilt pattern. I make digital pantographs once in a while, and I actually, a big part of my business this year has been teaching online. So Handy Quilter machines use a program. Well, we use Pro Stitcher, and we use a program called Pro Stitcher Designer, and it's a digital design. So it's kind of like digitizing. We have a lot of people who do embroidery digitizing, maybe not so many who do long arm digitizing. So we had this program and nobody really knew how to use it. And when we teach a 3-hour class, people just kind of glaze over because it's a lot. And so I developed an 8-week class called Stitch Ready. And I've actually run that class twice this year. In fact, we just wound up yesterday. And I'm going to gear up to do that again in 2025. And that has just been so much fun. I have really enjoyed making that course and teaching the course.
It sounds like a nice balance between having your own personal business and working with, or do you work with or do you work for Handy Quilter? How does that relationship kind of work?
Yeah, I am an independent contractor. That's a great question, because I think there's a lot of confusion about that in the world. But I'm an independent contractor, and so they will send me an offer for a contract, and I have the choice whether to accept it or not. And so they do ask me to do at least one event a month. One event a month. And, sometimes that means that in a month I might not do one, and other months I end up doing 3. And, I used to teach a lot more than I do now. It was getting to be a little much. So I have backed off a little, but it's a lot of fun. Great. Quilters are awesome people, and it's so fun to go across the country and meet them everywhere.
How did that course develop with Pro Stitcher? So tell us a little bit about that, because was it something that Handy Quilter helped you with the curriculum, or was it just you came up with the curriculum on your own? I'm curious.
So we actually have, I believe, 21 classes that we teach. So Handy Quilter gives us a curriculum. They are one of the reasons that I enjoy teaching for them is that it is not planned out. So there are 33 of us. We have like 5 or 6 bullet points that we need to touch on during a 3-hour class generally, but we're allowed to do that as we wish. So a student could attend 3 different weekends with 3 different educators with the exact same classes and have very different experiences because we all have different strengths. But what I realized was I didn't really like the results I was getting teaching. So we teach generally either 3 or 6-hour classes. And I just didn't really like how that was going with the students. I didn't feel like it was effective for them. And so I really sat down and I thought about how I like to learn. And I felt like it was just too much. And so I sat down, I really thought about how I wanted them to progress. So first of all, so we're designing things. So I wanted them to actually design projects, little projects that they could stitch out. And I felt like it needed to be at least 8 weeks. Now, the funny thing is that, it went really well through week 7. And the classes are probably an hour and a half of videos each week until the last week. And things got a little out of control. And the last week has about 4.5 hours of video. But part of that is because by the end we can do a lot with this program. We can actually make SVGs, and we can bring in SVGs, and we can turn SVGs into stitch files, and we can do so many amazing things that there were more things that I had to cover, and kind of just, it's not in any way a compendium of all the knowledge out there, but I wanted to empower my students to be creative and to find ways to do things creatively with this program. And it has been so fun to see my students. One of them made a Lego design, an edge to edge or a digital pantograph, and it is amazing. And to see these students make these designs and actually quilt them on quilts is just a lot of fun.
That sounds really cool. One of the other things I remember seeing that you have as part of your business this year or last year was a ruler. So you've dabbled in physical product manufacturing. Tell us about that.
So that kind of is a funny story as well. I was selected to teach at QuiltCon 2024. So they only allow so many students in the class, and for long arm classrooms, they're much smaller. And so they expect you to supplement the pay that you receive by selling products. And I was like, what am I going to have for a product? And so I had some rulers made, and that has been a lot of fun because I actually really like my ruler, and everybody who has used it has really liked it. It's a little bit of a takeoff on one of the handy quilter rulers. It's called the Stitch in the Ditch ruler, but it's a little bit small for my hands. So I made it longer, and I made one of the ends curved, and it's fun to use. It also has what's called easy grip on the bottom. And so it was an interesting process. I worked with another person who took our class, I believe, Julie Luoma. I think she was in patchwork with us as well. And her husband, Rick, is an engineer. So I have some skills in Adobe Illustrator. So I actually had it all drawn out exactly to the specs that I wanted. And then he was able to transfer that into whatever, however they produce them. And so that was a lot of fun. And I know what I want my next ruler to be. I actually have another one in mind. And so we'll get going on that one of these days.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's so fun to have, to see where the different paths of your business can take you. Because I was the same way. I had never thought that I would have any idea for any type of quilt notion or ruler. And then one day I was like, I really need this thing to go with my pattern. And same thing, Julie and Rick were the people to go to from Off the Wall Quilt. And we actually have an episode back from season 1, I think, with Julie. So it was fun to hear about her business as well. So small world, these quilting connections that tie us all together.
And that's one thing that I think has been really important in my journey, is that I haven't regretted any class that I have taken. There has been something I mean, especially patchwork, that really kind of kicked things off. And I actually just ended up in that class by accident because I had taken Bonnie Christine's immersion class. I was on a ship when COVID was winding up, and I'm like, I am going to take this class because this looks like this could be bad, and this will give me something positive to think about. And so I signed up for that. And that class was winding down, and that was kind of the end of April, and I could just feel myself sinking that, that we're all locked up and there's no contact. And I knew that I needed something to keep myself busy. And I signed up for the patchwork class, and it was a godsend in my life, personally and professionally, because to be able to chat with all of you online at that time, it's hard to even believe. I mean, it's hard to look back on that and realize how difficult that was. But boy, what a blessing in my life to be able to, when she said build a website, I was like, okay. And I went and I built a website. I did so many things that I didn't know how to do and I didn't think I could do. And yet I did them. And over time, all those things have just kept rolling, and it's been a lot of fun.
So you got started with your business and your website from patchwork. Where else have you found business knowledge? You said you had to become an independent contractor with Handy Quilter, and there are so many pieces to this solopreneur adventure that many of us quilters find ourselves in. Where have you found the most useful information?
Well, I have a doctorate in YouTube University, as I think many of us do.
With a minor in Google.
I just, one thing about me is I am fairly fearless. I figure what's the worst that can happen? And I'm willing to go try something. And I've taken advantage of some classes. I'm trying to think of all the different classes I've taken. I'm doing one right now with Jenna Kuchar about, and I've taken a Pinterest class. So I've taken Jenna is the podcast class because I'm kind of thinking about having my own podcast down the road. I have some more things planned. It's just, little things here and there. But one of a great class that I took was the Quilt Pattern Writers course with Elizabeth Chappell. Lots of connections there. And I think for any of you, if we have listeners out there who are starting their businesses, it's really important, I think, to meet people and to get to know people and to just put yourself out there. And so between patchwork, I've actually met a lot of the people from patchwork, which has been fun. And I had a chance to go to Elizabeth Chappell's house last month to dinner. She invites all her students. And so when I was in Houston for Quilt Fest, I got to go to her house, and it was wonderful to just meet all those people. So it kind of, your circle keeps growing. And I have not regretted any of those classes or any of the dollars that I've spent on those classes. I think that it has all come back tenfold.
I'm really curious about, when you mentioned money, and that's when my brain got thinking again. So I'm curious about Handy Quilter a little bit with in regards to travel, because you said you have to go to events at least once a month and then maybe more. So do they help you with travel? Do you pay for that up front? Like how does that kind of work?
So if I am doing an event for them, I get paid a daily rate for them, and then they do take care of my travel. We do have some set allowances that we stay within. Some places like Phoenix are very expensive, especially this time of year. And so I actually had to get a couple of permissions for hotels are very expensive in Phoenix this time of year. And that's where I was last week. I have to get approvals on those. But yes, they are actually very generous in taking care of us when we do that. And you know what? My favorite thing is that also they don't necessarily just want us to stay at the dirt cheap hotel. I'm actually not supposed to stay at hotels where the doors open into the parking lot. So kind of the old 60s motels, because they want us to be safe. They want us to be in situations where we feel secure. And I really appreciate that about the company.
That's really good. I know that, so I'm thinking of my mom, who's a long-arm quilter, and travel takes a big toll on her. So one thing that she does when she does travel is she gets there maybe a day early, maybe stay a day to rest after the event. Is that something they allow you to do, or do they keep it kind of a tight time frame?
Yeah, if I did that, I would have to pay for that myself. So I go the day before, because usually especially if it's a new shop that I haven't taught at before or a new situation. Usually I want to go and so for those who don't understand what I do, Handy Quilter has this cool program where we have 5 or 6 vans that each have 6 machines in them. They are a long arm machine on an education frame, which is a 5-foot wide machine frame. And we have 2 trucks that have 12 machines in them. And these vans and trucks are all over the country, and wherever they are, we are, and we teach. So I'm actually teaching on these long arms. So I like to get there the day before. I'm not in charge of setting them up, but I am in charge of making sure that they're running. And I want to meet the store owners and make sure that everything's good. And I carry a whole suitcase of samples and teaching supplies. So I have my 2 suitcases going through the airports because I have all my clothes plus my samples. So it is a lot, the thing that stresses me out the most is probably getting to the rental car and finding the shop and then I don't know why they make it so hard to return rental cars. But anyway, Phoenix was easy, but DFW is a nightmare. So some airports are better than others, but that's what we do. So, and then the event on the last day, part of the educator's job is to help break down the machines and to make sure they're clean and they're ready for the next educator. So by the time we get all that done, we usually can't get a flight that night. So often I'll end up staying over till the next morning.
It's really cool. I love the fact that you work with Handy Quilter. I love hearing the behind the scenes about working with a company, but also having your own. Now you mentioned patterns, and so you mentioned you still design patterns to get them out there. So what is your favorite way to kind of to market those?
So I will be honest that is by far the worst side of my business. In fact, I'm not sure if I'm going to even continue to do it. The only reason I'm still doing it is just because I like doing it. It's fun. So like the quilt behind me, I did this fall. So I do not sell a lot of patterns. I could not sustain myself on my patterns. I couldn't even buy the fabric for the next quilt on my pattern sales, probably, to be perfectly honest. So I really my business is very much changing into more teaching. In fact, I do have something very exciting coming up, and most people don't even know about this because it sold out so quickly. But in February, the studio educators at Handy Quilter will be in Australia, and the room will just be sitting empty. And so I talked to the people at Handy Quilter, and I am renting the space there, and I am going to have my own retreat in February, and I have 20 spots, and they sold out in 2 weeks. So I really didn't have to do much with that, but I feel like probably more of my strength is really in teaching and in designing projects. And it's hard for people to understand, but I like to design projects. Like this is one of my Christmas notebooks, and it just fits. A composition notebook will slide in, and I like designing things like this for people to do because I think that people, they like to quilt, but you get to a point where you've saturated your friend base with quilts, and all your family has quilts, and quilts are expensive. So sometimes we want to do different things. And I have really enjoyed maybe getting into teaching how to do some of those smaller projects and being a little bit more creative. I like to teach people this one. I did some free motion on this and I painted it. And so at my retreat, we will be doing not just learning how to use the long arms, but we will also be doing some painting and just being creative. And
so
that's really what
for those that are
joy.
For those that's listening, I just wanted to describe what you held up there. It looked like another book cover.
It is. It's a notebook cover. So yeah, the notebook just slides in, and this is totally made on the long arm. I have figured them out, but then I painted this one. This one I painted with Jacquard paints. They have a paint called Lumiere that's kind of shimmery. I don't know if you can see that, but and I just am not a great artist, but I have developed into a much better artist over the last few years. And there's another lesson for all of us is that we have to dare to be beginners. We get into these things and we start getting good at them and we forget. And especially for those of us who teach, I think it's really important for me to keep trying new things and to be bad at them, because it reminds me that when people come to my class and they're struggling with free motion quilting, I know what that feels like, because I remember when I was doing pottery and my pot flipped over and I felt like a big failure for 5 minutes, So I try to always be learning and growing because I think it makes me a better teacher.
One thing I hear from your story is you did actually a lot what I did as well, which we tried our hands in multiple things. And then we're kind of starting to narrow down and start to kind of niche and figure out what we love. And if you never try all these different things, all these different ideas, it's hard to figure out how to niche it down and how to pick one or two that you're really, really enjoying and really grow within that space. And I love the fact that you have created a project on a long arm. That is really cool. I don't think I've ever seen just a project made on a long arm. Usually it's just quilts. So that's really neat, really unique.
And I just think that's fun. And that design is available on my website. And so when I was in class last week, one of the ladies walked in with one, and that is so fun. And so maybe that's more the direction I need to go, because I have done some quilt alongs, and I do think I probably will have another quilt along maybe happen. But when I say quilt along, we're going to piece it and then quilt it, because I think that will probably rev up my base of people better than just a piecing quilt along, because most of my people. Well, I have a pretty big email list, but a lot of them are long armors now. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it's hard to niche down when you like everything. And I've had that struggle, and I've fought that whole thing, because I'm like, I'm multi-passionate. I can't niche it. And I did actually have a friend who gave me permission, and she said, you know what? You do what you want to do. You do what feels right to you. And if you want to do jumping jacks on your Instagram feed, just do it. Because I was just frustrated about the whole thing, that I felt like I was being constrained by a lot of the some of the classes that I've taken, where they're like, you have to have this beautiful feed and everything has to match. And I'm like, that's not my world. My world doesn't match. And I don't feel like that's reflective of me. And so I was kind of fighting it. And I really, I think, needed that friend to give me permission to be myself. And I can't tell you what a difference that made in my psyche. So it's been I've had a lot more fun since she told me that.
That's the key, right? Is to show up fully as yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's showing up and enjoying yourself within the marketing, within your space, within any community that you want to build. That's the key, is showing up the way that you like to show up. So I'm so proud of you for doing that, because a lot of people won't break out of that.
Yeah. The other good advice that I heard or read somewhere along the way is that you don't have to monetize and bring into your business every little thing that you're interested in. So, you can have some of those hobbies and aspects, especially with quilting, because there's so many different techniques and things that you can do with quilting. And some of them can just be your own personal creative exercise, and then others can become those patterns and those classes. So that's neat.
Well, and I think what you just said is really important, because I have had some other businesses in my past. So yes, I was a band director, but I have had some other businesses, and one of them was photography. And I ended up hating photography, because I just got so frustrated with people asking. Honestly, it was because I had people asking me to do illegal things, like take their pictures on railroad tracks and sneak their dogs into places. And it was so frustrating to me. And I just didn't want anything to do with that. And so I was very cautious about making quilting into a business. And I will be honest that I have to be really careful about that. And I have noticed that I'm not making very many quilts these days. And so I am doing projects, and I like doing those, but I'm pretty short on the quilt side of things, and I'm trying to guard that. And part of that is to maybe have some other hobbies. I'm actually thinking about getting a kiln and a pottery wheel just so that I have another hobby, because this really has become my job. And so that's something for people to think about. I think we really have to be careful. I don't have a 9 to 5. This is it. I'm home, and I guess that you have to be really careful, because I came home from an event on a Sunday morning, and one of my friends don't call me anymore because I don't answer the phone. So they called my husband. They're like, "What's Kay doing?" And he looked, and I'm sitting on the couch on my computer. He's like, "She's working." And a lot of my work now, it's quilty, but it's on the computer. And so I think that it is really important to maybe guard the time. And sometimes I just stay up late because the urge to quilt strikes me, and it's like, when I get that feeling, I really try to embrace it so that I don't want to fall out of love with quilting, because it's been such a big part of my life for so long that I'm really trying to guard the love of it.
I found myself in a similar boat where I stopped quilting for almost 2 years. I recently started again, and I've only shared it very little. I've kept it really close to the vest because I don't want to bring this back into my business. I like the marketing part. I like the teaching part. Don't think I want to monetize the quilting part anymore.
I totally get it.
Yeah. All a learning experience, and you have to pay attention to the feelings that you have when you're doing the things, because life's too short to be miserable with something you think you have to do. So,
right.
That's great.
You know, Kay, I was curious because you were talking about you've taken so many classes, immersion and patchwork and quilt patterns writing course. And I know that a lot of our audience has been really interested in probably all of those classes, if not at least one of those. So I was curious if you found one more helpful for beginners, because most of our audience are beginner quilters. They're just beginning on Instagram. I don't know all of them, obviously. We don't get to see a lot of the background when it comes to actual podcasts, but on Instagram, I'm able to see some of the people who are following us, and I kind of go in and see where they're at with their business, and they're very new for the most part. They have about 300 to 500 followers. They're making quilts, they're sharing their projects, and they may have one class, they may have one pattern. That's typically where they're at. So with all those classes that you took, which one do you think would be easiest or most beneficial for a beginner, and then maybe kind of building from there? What do you think?
I think I'm really glad. So I only took immersion. I didn't really want to be a quilt pattern. I a fabric designer then, maybe I do now, but I took it to learn Illustrator. I think that you have to know what it is you want to learn. So I think there are a lot of great teachers out there. I think that what I really liked about Patchwork was that she really made us think about what we did want and what we didn't want and why. And I think that maybe I have to be really careful, and I am very enthusiastic about things, and I will just jump in. If you give me an opportunity, I'm probably going to say yes, and I might regret it later. And so what I liked about that class was that I really had to stop and think about what it was I wanted. Oh gosh, they've all had such nuggets of truth and goodness for me. I would say, though, that you find someone who can help you build a website, because you've got to have a website. And don't take forever finding a brand name. I saw some people who spent 2 or 3 years doing that, and it's like, okay, you just missed 2 or 3 years. Just get something up. I do not like the whole idea of just having it be kind of, it's whatever it is. I mean, it needs to be decent because it represents you. That is you online. And so it needs to be decent. And then I think that the very next thing you need to do, and I'm changing my mind a little bit about this, but I think you need to have a lead magnet where you can start getting some people on an email list. That's how I started. That's probably how you guys started. I've seen a little bit of a change in that lately, where I have a lot of people on my email list who got there through a program called Quilt Block Mania, which Andy did with me also. And those are not necessarily my people, is what I've discovered, because they're there to get all the free stuff, but they hardly ever buy anything. They don't even buy the quilt patterns. Those are my long arm students who are buying the quilt patterns and they're quilting them, and it really is very interesting. So I think that the move these days is to maybe have a micro offer where you have something small that people can buy, but then you get a little bit more buy-in from the people. I absolutely still think you probably just need a free opt-in, because especially when you're starting, you need some bodies, or you just don't feel like you even have a business. I remember.
Yeah.
So I had one crazy thing happen that grew my list by like 1,000 people in one day. And I had one of those quilt blocks. Somebody shared it in the Missouri Star All-Stars page with a link. And all of a sudden, I mean, my life blew up that day because it was crazy. It was like, what's going on? But that was several years ago, and it was really fun. And I kind of needed that boost at that time, because I just didn't really, I felt like it was really slow going. And that's another thing for those of you who have newer businesses. We are at the end of 2024. And I just now am starting to feel like I'm getting the momentum going. It's like my Etsy shop dings, and I still get excited, but now it's dinging 3 or 4 times a day instead of 3 or 4 times a month. Okay. And so it takes a long time, and you have to have some endurance. This is a marathon, and it's not a sprint. Just focus on one thing at a time. And so you don't necessarily need to buy the big courses. Some of those big courses are worth it. And I generally will put, and they change over time. And I do tend to put reviews up on my blog. But I think taking some little courses that are only $27 or something, if you can learn something from that instead of spending $1,200, I'm all for it. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Sorry,
Thank
that was
you.
a
I
long
think that's
answer.
great advice. It's great,
Great
advice. Yeah.
Really, really good. So as you're looking ahead into 2025, what's the most exciting thing coming up?
Well, for sure, my course, which is called Elevated Stitches, and that is going to be in February. And I'm actually I'm trying to figure out how to do another one. I would like to, I've got to figure out how I can do more courses, because I really think that that's really fun. And I really want to focus more on that creative side. I'm also just excited to run Stitch Ready again. So Elevated Stitches is my retreat, and Stitch Ready is my Pro Stitcher designer course. And I just like watching people come alive when they learn the tools to do the things that they want to do. And that's so much fun. And I love just teaching long arming. I like teaching the beginners. I had 18 students this last weekend who had never touched a long arm before. Not one of them had touched a long arm. This is the on button. That's so much fun, because they come in and they are terrified, and they leave and they're excited. And several of them left as long arm owners, that's really fun, because now they control their schedule. They can do to their quilts what they want to do and make their own family heirlooms. And I just think that is really awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I'm sure we could spend hours more with you, Kaye, but this has been a fabulous discussion, and we want to thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has really been fun, and it's been fun to see you guys again.
And we do have our rapid fire.
Yeah, so don't forget.
So,
okay, I'm ready.
Are you going to kick them off, Tori, or you want me to go
I'll
first?
kick them off. All right, Kaye, you ready? You said you're ready.
Yes.
Okay. So, your first question is, what color do you struggle to include in your quilts?
Brown. Not a brown person.
Poor Brown gets the
I'm a bright colors. I struggled here, you guys. Okay, yeah. I struggled.
It's nice and balanced. So, question number 2: pre-cuts or yardage?
Yardage. I use mostly solids, because if I am going to spend time long arming something to death, I want the stitches to show. So I mostly use solids, and I actually buy it by the bolt.
It's effective.
Next question is, what is your favorite notion?
I really like the Karen K. Buckley scissors. especially the purple handled ones. I know that would be such a surprise because I love purple everything. Those scissors are the bomb with the little mini serrations. Oh, they're awesome.
And what have you found as the most rewarding part of your business?
Oh, I'm going to get choked up. I love it when I see the lights come on. I love it when somebody just finds a new love, whether it's that I taught them some technique that they can use on their long arm that's going to make their life easier, or we've introduced them to quilting and they love it. And I especially, it just makes my heart soft when somebody, when I can help them attain something that they've been trying to do and now they've got it. And they're, you just kind of see that light come into their eyes. That's my favorite part.
Spoken like a true teacher.
And it makes me cry, darn it. Oh, shoot. Yeah. My students laugh. If I can make it through a 2-day event without crying, that's pretty unusual because usually somebody will ask me some question that I'll go off and then the next thing I know, not only am I crying, but half the students are crying. So
pack your tissues to classes with Kay.
That's right. Bring the tissues. But it's because it means something to us. We're not just making a quilt. We're making a quilt generally for someone that we love. And I am teaching them, they probably already know how to do the piecing. I'm teaching them how to finish that quilt and how to put love in every single stitch. And I really do. When I'm making a quilt for someone, I am thinking about them during that process. And I talk to my students about that. And that's why we all end up crying. But it's not just a thing. We really are making heirlooms.
Well, we see the beautiful quilt behind you, but this next question is how many quilts are in the room with you right now?
Actually, not too many. This is really more my office. If we count projects, I'm probably around, I've got a baby quilt in this, probably about 8, 9, but we won't talk about the room downstairs. The funny thing is for a long time, I didn't have any quilts because I gave them all away. And then a couple of years ago, I had this crazy thought. I thought, one of these days, somebody's going to ask me to do a trunk show and I have nothing. So I have a lot of smaller quilts because a lot of my quilts have to live in a suitcase. And so I tend to not make so many giant quilts now, but I have a lot of smaller quilts. But yeah, I have a room downstairs, probably 40 or 50 down there.
And who is inspiring you? This can be within the quilt world or just some other aspect of your multi-passionate life.
That is a tough one. I'm going to pick some, gosh, I actually try, this sounds crazy, but I try to kind of ignore other creatives because I don't want their work to inform mine. And so it's not really so much that, but I have a new friend. Her name is Bree, and she actually works at Handy Quilter. And she was the one who told me that it was okay for me to not follow any of the rules of, what your feed should look like, and that it was okay for me to be myself. And she had only known me, for her to say that to me when she had really only known me for about a month, that made such a huge difference. And so I'm kind of her biggest fan right now because I really felt like that was important and the most life-changing advice I've had this year, probably.
It is great advice. It truly is.
Well, thank you so much, Kay. We wish you all the best, and we can't wait until we're in person together again.
I'm looking forward to meeting you guys again in real life, too. Thank you so much. I think you guys are doing great work out there. I really enjoyed the podcast, and I am a faithful listener. So thank you, because I know it's not easy, but I really appreciate the work you guys are putting into.
Well, thanks so much. And for our listeners, stay tuned. We will be right back with our takeaways and final thoughts about this episode. Oh, that was such a fun conversation with Kay of Oh Kaye Quilting. And we always take a minute to reflect. And I'm curious, Tori, what was your biggest takeaway from our conversation with Kaye?
Well, we've known Kaye for quite a while, as you may have heard from our interview. So one thing I was always fascinated about and never really got a chance to ask her was how she got to work with Handy Quilter as a teacher, because that just seems really just amazing and fun. It looks a little exhausting, especially from her point of view about all the traveling, but I feel like that is just an amazing thing to be able to do for as long as she's been doing it. I was really curious as well as how it works on the back end. So learning that she's a contractor, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I see how this works. And the way that she is using her connections and the email list and audience that she's been building to kind of move forward with her business. And it all kind of worked together. And that's probably my biggest takeaway. I was so curious about how she's working with Handy Quilter and how that all was fueling her business. So what was your biggest takeaway, Andi?
My biggest takeaway from our conversation with Kaye, and she mentioned this out loud several times, was that it does take time to build your business, to figure out exactly what your signature offer is going to be. Like you said, we've known her for several years. We've watched her business evolve. She talked about letting go of some of the pattern design stuff because she really wasn't that interested in it. And then, like you said, she took advantage of some of these opportunities with Handy Quilter, and now she's hosting her own retreats. What fun. It's been fun to watch her business grow and evolve, and I was so glad we got the chance to catch up with her. Speaking of catching up with people, we had a new review.
Yes, we did. It was so sweet.
It's always fun to hear from our listeners. So if you have a minute when this podcast ends, you can find a spot on the podcast player. They all have the option to leave a review, or you can hop over to quiltingontheside.com and leave a comment on our website.
So this review was from AK7490 Meows. Really fun name. She said, or they said, I don't know if it's a she or he, so they says, so helpful. I love your encouraging podcast. It gives me the tips I need to start my new business. I love listening to all of the episodes, and I bought Tori's new book. I forgot it said that. I'm so excited. I bought Tori's new book. It's fantastic. Thank you, ladies. You're welcome.
Yeah, it's so good to hear from AK number. Funny screen name. But yes, we are so delighted that you find value in the podcast, and we're thrilled that you supported us by buying Tori's book. And, you know, it's been a fun endeavor, and we're always thrilled to hear from our audience.
And if you would like more from us, if you want direct contact with Andi and I, we do have a Patreon. It's a paid community where it's only $5 to support our podcast, $5 a month, and you get a little extra content. And if you want to go one tier up, which is $15 a month, you can actually come in and we do a live question and answer every month, along with a few opportunities to come in and actually interview our guests with us, so you can ask your own questions. So you can check that out on Patreon. It's really easy to join. And like I said, we have a $5 tier and a $15 tier.
All right. Well, everyone have a great week until we're back here. Hope you get to do a little quilting on the side. What a great discussion. If you enjoyed this episode of Quilting on the Side, please leave us a review on whichever platform you're listening. It can be iTunes, Spotify, or even our YouTube channel.
And hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next chat. Until then, remember to have fun in your business and do a little quilting on the side.